So I kind of touched on these a little, but there's, obviously, if we're doing a workshop on green socialism, on eco-socialism, we think that there are problems of capitalism. And I think it's important to recognize that capitalism has been 100% been a failure at addressing human needs. This has become even more obvious with the COVID pandemic exploding in 2020. But overall, and it's often one of the things that we as socialists hear, right? Um, what if you fail? Because we're proposing radical transformational um, system change, not just reforms and maintaining and putting capitalism on some life support and giving it some crutches to keep it alive, while also maybe as social democrats would push for kind of changing the distribution of wealth slightly, but not changing the fundamental characteristics of capitalism. Um, and so often socialists are challenged, of failures of other socialist projects, of potential failures of utopian socialist projects, where that should they be implemented. Yet those criticisms are coming within a system that has been a 100% failure at addressing human needs, right? Massive poverty, massive social inequality, not just in the United States, but even more so when we, take a global view. So some kind of manifestations of this: no right to housing, right? We've got evictions during the pandemic and during crisis, let alone during supposedly good times, right? In the United States, housing is not a right. Housing is something that you have to buy, and that's true throughout most of capitalist society. Even the best kind of alternative systems like Vienna, Austria, is often used as the gold standard of public housing, right? But even there, it's 60% of the people live in subsidized or public housing, but it's still not a right, right? It's still ran for profit in many ways, and so the lack of a right to shelter is not provided, is a principal part of capitalism. No right to food, similarly, right? Our laws, our government, everything is set up to protect capital first and foremost, right? Hidden behind the flowery words of the founding documents of the United States is a system and a government, political and economic system and social system, right, that primarily concerns itself with protecting private property, with protecting the rights of landowners, with protecting oligarchs and maintaining them, right? And so we have no right to food, right? We arrest people when they starve. We make them we expect them to rely on private charities or bootstrapping. These fundamental things that are needed for survival, right? Housing, food, medicine, right to clean water, peace, lack of, these things are not provided for under capitalism. And capitalism makes no, attempt to even seem like these things are important to it. Profit is first, expansion of markets is primary. There's no right to medicine, as insulin and life-saving medicines see their prices skyrocket. Health insurance is tied to employment, and even those that have health insurance, tens of millions of them, despite having it, still can't afford it because we have commodified this essential service, this thing that everyone needs. And this is an area where, even amongst capitalist nations, right, the United States is an outlier, that we don't even provide universal health care. That's how bad it is here. And one thing I was talking the other day with Garrett about is, that tied to employment is just huge here. I think it was Obama that said that even if he could pass universal health care, he wouldn't, because he didn't want to see people leaving their jobs, right? Millions of people work their jobs solely to get that health insurance because it's absolutely unaffordable without having it provided through your work. And none of that should be, placed on us. That the taking care of the society should be should be the burden of the government, the burden of society. And that's just not what we have in the United States. And it's not something that is guaranteed or even sought after under capitalism. It's much to the opposite. Similarly, no right to clean water. We've got fracking and industry destroying what little fresh water we have, right? Fresh water makes up a very, very, very small amount. Potable water, even less, drinkable fresh water of the water on Earth. So we often think about all the water that we have on Earth, but very little of it can sustain life on land. Very little of it is drinkable. And under capitalism and under capitalist means of production and capitalist, market motivations, we're seeing that water being increasingly, poisoned. We're seeing that water being increasingly commodified. We're seeing fracking around the country. We're seeing pipelines going, over and above our aquifers. We're seeing, Nestle going into, areas that have problems with water and pulling out as much as they possibly can just to bottle and sell to us. And then finally, capitalism offers no right to peace, right? Capitalism demands war and conflict, right? If our economic and social systems and political systems are guided by the demand for ever increasing markets, that means that we have a system that is encouraging conflict, right? That we have a finite number of resources on the earth. We have a finite number of markets on the earth. We have a finite amount of production that can be done, and therefore that creates capitalists think competition is a good thing, but competition is what leads to war. Capitalism is what leads to oppression and suffering. Capitalism upholds these things because it's necessary. Capitalism will always put property, profits, and market over human needs.